We begin the news by telling you that the National Association of Telecommunications Subscribers is engaging the Nigerian Communications Commission seeking a possible reversal of the 50% telecom tariff hike to 10% as the Nigerian Labour Congress signals readiness for protest. The federal government approved a 50% increase after operators initially requested a 100% hike. However, subscribers are pushing for a 10% adjustment. And if talks fail, they plan to file a lawsuit next week to challenge the decision. The hike, the first in over a decade, is aimed at revitalizing the struggling telecom sector. The labor union, led by Joe Ajero, criticized the increase on Wednesday, warning of potential collective action, including a nationwide boycott of telecom services to compel the government and the NCC to reverse the decision. And joining us live to help put this into perspective, we're joined by business and policy analyst Kenneth Ikenwa. One welcome to you, Kenneth, and thanks for joining us on the news.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Kenneth, how do you foresee public opinion reacting to the telecom tariff hike, especially in terms of consumer backlash and potential protest? What are the best strategies to manage the public relations in this scenario? What's the win-win situation for both parties?
Well, this is quite pathetic that we're having to actually burden the Nigerian people with so much tariffs, especially with the most important element, which has helped to ease in the lives of the Nigerian people. The Nigerian society actually runs on the currency of communication now. The smallest person selling ice cream, selling food vendors are able to even get their goods and their services across because communication is available. This we had lacked in the last 30 to 35 years of our existence, where communication seems to be mobile communication, telephone communications to be the exclusive, reserve of the rich. But now it's been liberalized. Now, to think that we are having to cope with the kind of hyperinflation, the kind of skimp inflation and shrink inflation that we're dealing with, I think that this tariff is another form of inflation. But most importantly, we should be able to speak the truth to power, like I love to say, in quote, that this is another form of taxation of the Nigerian people. Now, what kind of taxation is this? In economics, we will say this is Pigouvian taxation. It is a taxation that third parties, which are we the consumers, are actually paying for, particularly because we do not have any reason to be paying for this, but because maybe some form of regulation, some form of cost escalation in part of telecoms operations is leading to us as third parties to be beneficiaries, negative beneficiaries of these network externalities. But I would have expected better from the government, who has promised renewed hope for the Nigerian people, who has also promised to alleviate the living conditions and increase the standard of Nigerian people. This increment, this taxation, tariff, taxation, inflation of rates, whatever you want to call it as. I don't want to be angry this afternoon because I'm already angry. I was extorted by men in uniform and touts this morning to the tune of 30,000. So how much more are we going to have to pay as a people? This taxation will definitely have multiplier effects on the Nigerian economy. You will see prices going up. You will see people that actually make use of these mobile communications having to translate the cost to end users like yourself or myself. And this is not the story that the government will want the Nigerian people to be believing or to be, accommodating and soaking in at this point in time.
Absolutely. But Kenneth, you did mention a few things. You talked about the high inflationary cost. We do understand that the telecom sector has been liberalized, so it's open to free market forces. And they're not a charity to think from the perspective of this telcos. They deal with high energy cost, there's inflation, there's cost of doing business, and they've not increased tariff in the last 10 years. So they do have some point here. But in your opinion, you've also talked about the government, that look, why are you making Nigerians pay more taxes, as you put it? In your opinion, the government is in a very difficult place right now, between a rock and a very hard place. How should the government balance the interests of telecom companies and consumers when it comes to regulating telecom tariffs, also understanding that this is a free market economy and the sector has been liberalized?
Yes, this is the free market economy, and I think I bought my first GSM SIM card in the year 2002, and I bought it for about 8,000 naira. We had two major competitors then, and when more competitors came in, going back to the free economic policy and framework, the prices came down. So it is expected that where there is competition and where there is standardization of product, the prices will come down. But if you ask me, what the government is not in the tight corner here. The government seems to be on the part of the capitalists who actually run the system. Now, when it comes to telecommunications, the advantage, irrespective of the fact that there are claims that tariffs have not been increased in the last 10 years, the advantage that most telecom players have playing their game in Nigeria, having their operations in Nigeria, is the power of numbers. Nigeria has the largest market size in Nigeria. Nigeria has the largest market size in Africa, and even in the Middle East combined. So you have the Middle East Africa market. Nigeria has the largest market size. And for one of the major telecom firms, who I'm not going to, dignify by advertising here, Nigeria in the last 25 years or 20 years has been the major source of profitability. And when that firm was actually slammed with a fine, it affected their operations, even back in the home country. So in a market where you are making what in economics or business economics we call abnormal profit, you shouldn't be complaining. You should even be looking for better ways that you can offer better services, better increased standard services and standards of those services, and make them more globally competitive. Now, there are other measures, other strategies that could have been employed, to actually see to it that the present cost regime is maintained and that the market demand continues to go on the increase. So you can't come and now say that there is an increase in energy. There are other alternative sources of energy that we hope that some of these firms should have been able to adopt. So I think the major problem we have here is a Nigerian problem and not even a telecoms problem. How innovative is the Nigerian economy? How innovative is the country Nigeria? On the Global Innovation Index, where do we rate? On the Global Economic Index, where do we rate? And because of that, rather than work towards competitive advantage, most firms are working towards competitive disadvantage. We have an abundance of solar energy, we have an abundance of wind energy, we have an abundance of hydro energy, we have an abundance of bio waste in the Nigeria transfer or geographical territory that is not being taken advantage of. So the issue of energy shouldn't be the issue. Now, to what extent have these telecoms organizations actually reduced the salaries of their executives? To what extent have these telecoms organizations actually reduced their staff size? And to what extent have they collaborated with international firms to see to it that their cost of operations go down so that it doesn't affect the bottom line and they can maintain the standards?
Now, finally, Kenneth, before I let you...
alternatives should be looked at.
Now, Kenneth, before I let you go, I mean, you seem to be on the side of the people, rightfully so, and you believe that these telcos are just being lazy, not being creative, in looking for alternative sources rather than passing the bulk to the consumers. As we speak, Labour is threatening fire and brimstone. There are talks with the Nigerian Communications Commission. What will be your advice to these telcos as we understand that to prevent a shutdown, a boycott of their services from Nigerians?
All right, I'm not an advocate of using fire to fight fire, right? I'm an advocate of using common sense and corporate strategy to fight corporate fire. And for the government, what the government should have actually done is to see to it that the corporate taxes of these telecoms firms or the corporate taxes of these telecom firms are reduced so that they can have a sense of belongingness and use that tax window to actually recuperate their profit and show up their profit. Now, on the part of the firms, I mean, as a management consultant, as a strategist, simple things can be done. Simple corporate strategies can be employed. One is what we call retrenchment in strategic management. They should retrench some of their assets. Most of the telecoms firms in Nigeria are operating with bogus assets. Almost every one of them have base stations. Why can't they collaborate? Why can't they go to strategic ventures so that 4 telecom firms, 4 ISPs can operate one particular base station and give service to another area? We don't even want to start talking of the health implications and the infrastructural implications and the architectural implications of having too much of this infrastructure, telecoms infrastructure everywhere. So we should look at that. They should also look at cost reduction strategies and also reduce the salaries of the executives. The executives are receiving humongous salaries and nobody's talking about that. Well, the government will be smiling because some taxes are coming back to the government. But if these strategies are put in place and everybody puts their hands on the deck, then we can make the Nigerian people smile again and not cut their throats off or cut their heads off simply because we need to provide services. So the NLC, I would not advise to go at threatening, to go at closing down, because we need these services. There should be negotiations, and these negotiations should be strategic, should be academic, and should be in the interest of the people. Ceteris paribus.
Business and policy analyst Kenneth Ikewa, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for your wonderful insights on the subject.
Thank you for having me on.